This isn't just an old piece of cloth.
For hundreds of years, this simple piece of cloth, 14 feet long.
It's a silent witness to something no one can fully explain.
You can see clearly the face here.
A faint image of a crucified man burned into linen.
Not a painting. It's not a print. It's not created by any known artistic technique.
Without paint, without ink, discovered centuries ago, but still resisting every test we throw at it. Scientists say it defies all known technologies. Believers say it captured the very moment of resurrection. And now, thanks to an unexpected moment on the Joe Rogan Experience,
historically absolutely did exist, and we think that this is the shroud that covered him.
It's back in the spotlight. Could this be the first real image of Jesus Christ? Or is it just the world's most sophisticated medieval illusion? Let's uncover the truth. The shroud. A cloth or a clue? It's long, narrow, and covered in mystery. The Shroud of Turin measures over 14 feet in length and just under 4 feet in width. But it's not the size that draws you in. It's the image. A faint, ghost-like imprint of a man appears across its surface.
You can see clearly the face here.
Front and back, as if the cloth had once wrapped around a crucified body. What's eerie is how detailed it is. The wounds, the blood trails, the bruises. Even more startling, there's no paint, no ink, nothing applied to the fabric in any normal way. In 1898, an Italian photographer named Secondo Pia took the first detailed photographs of the shroud. When he developed the negatives, he was stunned. What looked faint and confusing to the naked eye revealed a striking, lifelike face and body. It was as if someone had taken a photograph 2,000 years ago, before cameras even existed. That's when the theory began to spread. Maybe this wasn't just a relic. Maybe this was evidence. Evidence of a body transformed. Evidence of resurrection. The shroud became more than an object. It became a question no one could quite answer. Where did it come from? The disputed origins. The mystery deepens when you ask a simple question: where did this cloth come from? The first time anyone officially documented the shroud was in 1354. A French knight, Geoffroy de Charny, displayed it in a small church in Liry, France. Just a few decades later, the local bishop, Pierre d'Arcis, declared it a fake. He even claimed the artist had confessed to painting it. That claim stuck for centuries, shaping public opinion. But there's one problem. No one could prove how it was made. Some scholars believe the shroud story didn't begin in France. They point to older references in early Christian texts about a sacred image known as the image of Edessa. That cloth, said to bear the face of Christ, was housed in Constantinople for centuries before disappearing during the chaos of the Fourth Crusade in 1204. What if Crusaders took it back to Europe, and what resurfaced in France decades later was the same relic under a new name? Then there's the art. Byzantine icons of Jesus from as early as the 6th century bear an uncanny resemblance to the face on the shroud. Long nose, narrow face, and distinctive beard. It's as if artists were copying something they had already seen. Faith versus forgery. Why it became a religious enigma. The Shroud of Turin doesn't just sit in a museum case. It sits at the intersection of belief and science. To believers, it's something sacred, an object that physically touched the body of Christ. The details seem to match the crucifixion described in the Gospels. Scourge marks across the back, nail wounds in the wrists and feet, a pierced side, a crown of thorn-like punctures on the forehead. It isn't just suggestive, it's precise. But what makes the shroud unlike any other Christian relic is how it refuses to behave like religious art. There's no stylistic flourish, no symbolism. It's coldly anatomical, clinical, and that's why scientists got involved. They weren't trying to prove miracles, they just couldn't explain it. Skeptics, however, argue the shroud is the ultimate forgery, a masterpiece of illusion designed to inspire devotion in a time when relics meant power. Maybe it was created by a gifted medieval artist using methods we still don't understand, or maybe it was the result of some chemical or photographic reaction we haven't fully replicated yet. But here's the catch. No one has ever recreated the shroud, not perfectly, and that keeps both sides awake at night. Sturpps' 1978 investigation Science meets mystery. In 1978, the mystery was finally faced with the microscope. A group of American scientists, engineers, and chemists formed the Shroud of Turin Research Project, Sturpps. Their goal was not to confirm faith, but to find facts. Over 5 days in Turin, they subjected the shroud to every non-destructive test they could think of: ultraviolet fluorescence, infrared thermography, X-rays, and chemical analysis. If this were a forgery, science would reveal the trick. But what they found didn't fit any trick. The image wasn't made of paint, ink, or any pigment. Under magnification, the markings appeared only on the outermost fibers of the linen, just the top 2 or 3 microns. That's thinner than a human hair. There were no brush strokes, no signs of pressure, no substance added. It wasn't absorbed into the fabric. It was somehow on it. Then came the shock. When they ran the image through a NASA-developed device called the VP8 Image Analyzer, it revealed something unexpected: 3-dimensional data. The image's light and dark areas weren't random. They correlated with spatial depth, like a face mapped in topography. Paintings don't do that. Photos don't either. But somehow the shroud did, and nobody knew how. Now first, like always, be sure to hit the like button down below. It helps us out tremendously with the reach of this video. Thank you. Carbon dating crisis, debunked or misinterpreted? A decade later, in 1988, it looked like the mystery had finally been solved, or so the headlines claimed. 3 independent labs in Oxford, Zurich, and Arizona performed radiocarbon dating on a small sample of the shroud. The result? The linen dates between 1260 and 1390 AD, squarely in the medieval era. The verdict was swift. The shroud was a fake. But the controversy didn't end there. Almost immediately, critics pointed out a crucial flaw. The sample used for testing may not have come from the original fabric. Textile experts noticed that the area tested looked different, thicker, discolored, possibly rewoven. Some suggested it had been patched during medieval repairs after fire damage. In 2005, Raymond Rogers, a chemist who had worked on the original Sturpps team, tested fibers from the same region.
So I got out the rice samples and I got out the shroud samples, and I went to work again.
He found cotton threads interwoven with the linen and traces of dye, materials not present in the rest of the shroud. His conclusion? The tested area was not representative of the whole cloth. The carbon dating, he claimed, was invalid. So the question remains, did science date the shroud, or did it date a clever medieval patch? If Rogers was right, the mystery was back on. The DNA and pollen trail, geography in the fibers. If the shroud was made in medieval Europe, why does it carry the dust of the Middle East? That's the question scientists started asking when Swiss criminologist Max Frey analyzed the cloth in the 1970s. Under a microscope, he found pollen grains pressed into the fibers, grains from plants that only grow in and around Jerusalem, not France, not Italy, but the very soil of the Holy Land. Then came blood analysis. Researchers identified type AB, rare but more common in Jewish populations. More intriguingly, the blood showed high levels of bilirubin, a chemical the body releases during severe physical trauma, the kind you'd expect from scourging, crucifixion, or extreme suffering. Even the fabric itself told a story. The linen had a herringbone weave, consistent with textiles used in the Middle East during the 1st century. It was not the typical weave of medieval Europe. None of this proves the man in the image is Jesus. But it raises an uncomfortable question for skeptics. If the shroud was forged in the 1300s, how did its creator embed centuries-old pollen, trauma-specific blood chemistry, and historically accurate weaving into a single cloth? Coincidence or something else entirely? Joe Rogan's reaction and the cultural revival. In recent years, the Shroud of Turin faded from the spotlight until Joe Rogan reignited the conversation. Known for skepticism and curiosity, Rogan wasn't someone you'd expect to explore a religious relic. But when the topic came up on the Joe Rogan Experience, something shifted. The turning point? Learning the image had no paint or ink.
They also don't understand how it was made, which to me is very fascinating because it's not paint. They don't know what caused the image itself.
Yet encoded 3D data. How do you make a photo negative with depth in the 1300s? He asked. That one question rippled through millions. Rogan framed the shroud not as faith, but as a puzzle, and that drew in a new audience. People who never cared before started researching, watching documentaries, and joining discussions. It wasn't about miracles, it was about mystery. Once again, the shroud became something more than cloth. It became a challenge. Resurrection, faith, and the theological divide. For many, the shroud isn't just an artifact, it's a record of resurrection. The wounds match the Gospels. The image, they believe, was burned onto the cloth by a burst of divine energy when Christ rose. The Bible describes Jesus' glorified body as shining like the sun. Some link that to the radiation-like markings on the linen. In Italy, scientists recreated similar effects using powerful UV lasers, but only at energy levels medieval people couldn't dream of. Skeptics say this is just hopeful theology. Faith, they argue, should not rely on relics or experiments. And many theologians agree, the resurrection lives in the heart, not in fabric. Yet the shroud refuses to be dismissed. Its silence challenges both reason and belief. Even today, it pulls science and spirituality into the same room and dares them to speak. So what do we make of it? A linen cloth carrying an image no one can replicate. Blood stains that match ancient trauma. Fibers that whisper of Jerusalem, not Europe. A photograph before photography. Science has poked, scanned, and analyzed, but every answer leads to more questions. Is it the work of an unknown genius, a sacred accident, or something truly beyond us? Maybe it isn't proof or forgery. Maybe it's a mirror reflecting what we choose to believe. In the end, the Shroud of Turin leaves us with one undeniable truth. Some mysteries aren't meant to be solved, only remembered, only felt.